If Lou Gehrig and Cal Ripken Jr. had never been born or had never played baseball, we would speak of the third man on the consecutive games list with the reverence we reserve for legends. We would call this other player the Iron Man. This other man would roll off our tongues in conversations about games played and perseverance and character. Instead, history has packed his story away in a dark closet and nudged the doors shut. But what a story it is. But without Ripken and Gehrig, the third man on this list would be the all-time leader with 1,307 games. That man is Everett Scott. Now, to me, the situation of no Cal Ripken and no Lou Gehrig raises a number of interesting what-ifs. 1,307 games straight is a lot. But if this was the cap, if this was the ceiling, would more ball players have been tempted to try to surpass it? If you're a ball player and you've already put in 2 or 3 straight seasons without a break, you might think, okay, I could do 5 more. I could shoot for that. But what happens when you see Lou Gehrig's 2,130 games, 14 straight seasons, or Cal Ripken's 2,632 games, 16 straight seasons? You probably think, why even bother? Even if this reasoning is partly true, it's also 100% true that in the history of baseball, only 7 players have played more than 1,000 consecutive games. And after Gehrig and Ripken, Everett Scott has the most consecutive games ever. Tonight, we will not overlook the number 3 man on this list. Everett Scott, a legend in his day, who, because of circumstance and timing, turned into a footnote. You're listening to the Midnight Library of Baseball, where there's no loud music, no jarring sounds, only nostalgic, thought-provoking, emotional stories about baseball. I'm Ben Orlando. When you see Cal Ripken Jr. or Lou Gehrig, it's not hard to picture the words endurance and strength alongside these men. But Everett Scott? Scott stood 5 feet 8 inches tall. And when he first entered the league, he maxed out at a whopping 120 pounds. Author John Eisenberg has a colorful physical description of Scott in his book, The Streak. Quote, with his bugged-out eyes and broad ears jutting from his football-shaped head, Scott was an adult version of what kids called a pipsqueak. End quote. Scott's physical stature almost crushed his major league dreams. According to a scout for the Washington Senators, the team declined to sign Scott because his slight frame would not allow him to, quote, keep up the strenuous pace demanded in the big show, end quote. I'd love to see an interview with this scout when he witnessed Scott's becoming the endurance king. So you have this shortstop who's really fast and really smart. But unlike Gehrig or Ripken, Scott wasn't the greatest hitter. His lifetime batting average was .249. That might not be a problem if you're a power hitter. Scott was not a power hitter. He never hit more than 6 home runs in a season. But back at this time, teams didn't care so much if a shortstop could hit. His defense was fantastic. He led the league in fielding percentage for shortstops 8 years in a row, and he hit well in the clutch. He was also team captain for the Red Sox and then the Yankees when he was traded in 1922. To a fan, Scott was just another ball player who did okay, but to his team, he was invaluable. And all the while, game after game, he continued to play without rest. Now, some people said that Everett Scott was soft. For instance, he padded his shoes so that when players like Ty Cobb slid into second, spikes first, Scott wouldn't get stabbed. Sounds reasonable enough. Scott was also one of the few ball players of the day who really trained in the off-season. He jogged during the winter and did calisthenics. But the whole time he was playing, day after day, Scott was also suffering from a debilitating condition. Throughout his career, Scott suffered from large, painful boils that would appear on random parts of his body. His feet, hands, arms, face, just about anywhere. From John Eisenberg, quote, "The infections oozed pus and often throbbed, but he could play with them if he wrapped bandages around them so tightly that he lost feeling in the afflicted areas." End quote. Imagine giant, excruciatingly painful boils appearing at random on your body, causing you to wrap bandages around your arms, your legs, your head, so tightly you couldn't feel. And this was your pregame ritual. Every game, for up to an hour, for 9 years. Do you think that's soft? I tried to look up what this condition was called, but I couldn't find a lot. And even with his ritual, sometimes Scott couldn't do anything to stop the infections. Shortly after his 600th game, Scott developed a giant boil over his right eye. When he wrapped his head with the bandage, he could barely see. He would have missed the game had a thunderstorm not led to a postponement. And this is a common theme with all players on the consecutive games top 10. Luck. Because it seems like, okay, you should be able to play in a lot of games in a row, even if it's only one inning. But throughout the course of a long season, shit happens. Unpredictable mishaps where you simply cannot play. Like, for instance, your train breaking down in the middle of nowhere, which is what happened to Scott in 1922. Instead of taking the train to Chicago with his Yankee teammates, Scott decided to take this off day in the schedule to spend with his wife and son. He gave himself plenty of time to meet up with the team, except in the middle of the night, his train broke down, and Scott had no idea what to do. At this point, he was 970 games into his streak and wanted badly to reach 1,000. As we discussed before, it only takes one moment to stop, hold, years of hard work and perseverance. And to Scott, this seemed like that moment. He stepped off the train into a sea of darkness. Except far in the distance, he could just barely detect a light. So he grabbed his bags and trudged off across the fields and hills, and eventually he reached a lone farmhouse. Remember, it was the middle of the night, but Scott was desperate. He walked up and pounded on the door, and eventually, a deep, cranky response came. Quote, "Who goes there, and what do you think you're doing waking us at this hour?" End quote. Scott explained who he was, that he was the Yankee shortstop, and he was in trouble. Now, today, if a man knocked at your door in the middle of the night, claiming to play for the New York Yankees, you'd probably call the police. But this was 1922. The farmer replied, quote, "So you're Everett Scott. I've heard of you. What do you want?" End quote. Scott asked to use the telephone, and eventually the farmer opened the door and let him in. From there, Scott convinced a reluctant mechanic at the nearest garage to drive him to Chicago, for a hefty fee, of course. On the way, Scott encouraged the man to drive as fast as possible. This led to a cop pulling them over. But when Scott explained the situation, the cop let him go. A few minutes later, another cop pulled them over. And when Scott finished explaining this time, the cop turned on his sirens and escorted Scott the rest of the way. Scott walked into the dugout in the seventh inning to find an irritated manager, Miller Huggins, who grudgingly let him play. What Scott had going for him was that he was nothing like Babe Ruth, who was a thorn in Huggins' side. Scott was polite, mature. He trained hard, went to bed early, and never talked back to his coaches. But this mishap really made Scott step back and wonder, why am I doing this? Why am I taking this so seriously? Well, he didn't want to let down his team, but he also realized he did want to reach 1,000 consecutive games. Because he wasn't a superstar. He wasn't a great hitter like Ty Cobb or Babe Ruth. This was his thing. He was known for his streak. And if you're known for something, if people celebrate and respect you for a particular accomplishment, wouldn't you want to draw that out as much as possible? But why does this matter to baseball? In another time, maybe a few years earlier, Scott may have gone completely unnoticed. But Al Monroe Elias had put the consecutive game streak on the map. And in the early 1920s, baseball was looking for someone like Everett Scott. Remember, in 1920, baseball was rocked by the Black Sox scandal. Players were crooked, dishonest. And on top of this fact, the New York Yankees were having a hard time dealing with the oversized personality of Babe Ruth. Every day it seemed like he was in the papers for something outlandish or unethical. So, how great was it to have someone like Everett Scott? He was upstanding, he was hardworking. He was nicknamed the Deacon by his teammates because he woke early on Sundays to go to church. He was the model ball player pursuing the model baseball record. Baseball and the Yankees intentionally played up the record and brought attention to Scott to divert attention from scandal and Babe Ruth off the field. On April 26, 1920, Scott passed Fred Luderus. Then he passed George Pinckney, and journalists were actually writing about it. This was a fundamental change in the way baseball and fans saw statistics. As Eisenberg pointed out in his book, up to this point, people completely ignored career totals. Quote, Ty Cobb had established dozens of well-known benchmarks by then, but they were all from single seasons. Cobb's career totals were seldom publicized. End quote. Another example was George Moreland's Comprehensive Statistical Encyclopedia, published in 1914, where, curiously absent, was Cy Young's ridiculous career win total of 511 games. So now, as the consecutive game record received more focus, so did other career stats. It was no longer only about what you did this year, but what you accomplished throughout your baseball lifetime. If you like the show and crave more content, you can become a Patreon member, where you'll have access to additional audio episodes, video interviews, and other articles and images linked to the show. Go to Patreon/Midnight Library of Baseball. And since this is a one-man production, every bit of support helps. You can donate at midnightlibraryofbaseball.com, and you can add reviews on iTunes and Spotify. Okay, back to the show. On May 2nd, 1923, Everett Scott reached 1,000 straight games, and it happened in Washington, D.C. It was a big moment for Scott and for baseball. He was presented with a gold medal by American League President Ban Johnson. There were speeches, applause, and positive write-ups in the papers. But why? Why did people care? According to Eisenberg, quote, Scott was a stable family man, someone you could count on, more like a neighbor or work colleague than a ball player. And he just got up and went to work every day, like millions of Americans. Honestly, what was more admirable than that? End quote. But of course, the thing that stands out here is that Scott's fellow teammates and ball players did not show up in the same way. On a day-to-day basis, you wouldn't notice if someone sits out here or there. Only by tracking it, as Al Monroe Elias did, could you really see who was showing up some of the time, or most of the time, or the rare ball player who showed up every single game. By 1925, Scott was slowing down. He was only 32, but 32 back then is not the same as 32 today. Still, Scott was playing well, which is why he was surprised and angered when on May 5th, Miller Huggins not only replaced him with Paul Wanninger, but refused to sub him in when he pulled Wanninger after 2 at-bats. Just like that, without a bang, but a blip, his 9-year streak was over. Later, Scott said he understood that his streak put Huggins in a tough bind, that it handicaps a manager who doesn't want to take a man out because of a record, even if it's the right move. Scott went on to play a few more years and then retired and turned to his second passion, bowling. He also wrote a children's book. Everett Scott played with everything he had, bandaged, bruised, overlooked, and he set a standard that may have lasted a century. I wonder what Scott thought of his streak. 1,300 games. It was 700 more than the next closest ball player. Sitting on the bench that day, did he think his streak would last years, decades, a century? Whatever he thought on this day, it was likely nowhere near the crazy truth that of all people, of all ball players on all teams, in all times, it would be his teammate less than a month from the end of Scott's streak who would start his own streak and would not only go on to break Scott's record, but would absolutely shatter it. Next time, we'll dive into the life of Everett Scott's teammate, a young first baseman who, in 1925, humbly took his position at first base and remained there for 14 years until he literally could not swing a bat. But before we end, I have another listener baseball story. Tonight's story comes from Eric Edelstein.
I mean, I just love. I've been a baseball fan since I was real little. My dad took me to games in Oakland, and when I was like 2 or 3, and then just a lifetime love was born of baseball. Super nerdy kid into cards and watching every game. And then when I was 12, I saw within 1 year 8 Men Out and Field of Dreams. And I was at like a card show in Tacoma, Washington with my dad, and we saw Field of Dreams and went to El Torito. Like, we're talking magic stuff. And it woke up this fire for me to collect the Black Sox. I started mowing lawns and doing all kinds of crazy chores. And then I was a real wheeler dealer when it came to cards. And I've been collecting since I was like 6 or 7. And there was a very famous baseball card dealer in Vancouver, Washington named Kit Young. So I went over with all my modern cards. I kept my Frank Thomases and my Griffies. And I traded all my modern cards and maybe $300, which was a ton to a kid. And I actually got a Shoeless Joe Jackson card. Completely beaten up, but a 1913 National Game card. And that woke up something in me for collecting the Black Sox. And then at one point in time, I decided I was going to try to get all of the 8 Men Out. But then hilariously, it kind of shifted on the Black Sox. And I was like, man, Chick Gandil's an awful human. This is criminal. Like Eddie Saccott, my heart goes out to him, taking in his wife's sister's kids and trying to pay for a farm in Michigan. But like, he ultimately had a test and failed horribly. And he'd probably be in the Hall of Fame if he didn't. About 3 or 4 years ago, I sold all the Black Sox cards except for the original Shoeless Joe, and I kept a Buck Weaver. But it's a funny kind of thing how you grow up and all. It's like if you're a kid, you think Jesse James or Billy the Kid is cool. Then now I've changed on Pete Rose, and I've changed on the Black Sox a little bit. Where I'm like, man, I get to have my dream job. If I went to my dream job every day and there was one rule and I broke it, man, it's hard to have a Hall of Fame argument. I think Shoeless Joe has to get in. I hope that this whole Pete thing allows Shoeless Joe to get in, because my dad and I went on a minor league baseball trip and saw all these minor league teams in the South. We went to the Shoeless Joe Jackson Museum. There's these wonderful people that run it, and then they took it to his grave site. Like, there's a whole lot of people that would have some healing if Shoeless Joe gets in the Hall of Fame. Let's talk about Field of Dreams and ease his pain in your glorious podcast. Yeah. But I do think that would ease his pain or the people around him. Every time. My wife loves to try to watch Field of Dreams with me to watch me cry, because I'm not a huge crier. And so now I'm like, you have to watch the movie, eyes forward. Because anytime it plays on the big screen, they do a revival, I just have to go. And like, James Earl Jones' Terrence Mann, it's just one of my favorite performances ever. Like, I remember being a kid, and even I'm a character actor proudly, but I remember being a kid being like, you're not Ray Kinsella, you can't play that, but you could be Terry Mann. And that's the really fun part for me anyway. And peace, love, dope, now get the hell out. I want them to leave me alone. I want them to quit talking to me, solve their problems, write again, come again. No, what do you want? Oh, dog gonna be here. Like, it's just so perfect. Moonlight Grim. It means we're going to Chisholm, Minnesota. I must be out of my mind. And Burt Lancaster. I better be going. At least she'll think I gotta go. Like, I just remember being a kid just worshiping those character actors. I was self-aware. I knew I couldn't be Costner. But I looked at like James Earl Jones. My God. He's just my hero. He's my favorite. And he just, after Field of Dreams, became one of my favorite actors. I played until like high school, and then the lack of talent caught up to me, and I was nudged toward performing. But yeah, I loved it. I was a very good fielding first baseman, and a pitcher. My dad wouldn't let me throw curveballs. He was way ahead of the curve on this. The Dodgers should talk to Dan Edelstein. But he was way ahead of the curve on that. So I was throwing slow fastballs that were hit. But I loved it a ton. My dad was the coach, and he was totally supportive and had all the kids play an equal amount, and like was the opposite of a horrible Little League dad. And we still go to baseball games together. We'll go to see the Dodgers on Sunday. And that's so much of what baseball is, and so much of what your podcast now is. It's fathers and sons, and now mothers and sons, mothers and daughters. It's just this incredible way to connect, because there's no better place to be than the ballpark.
Thanks, Eric, for sharing your story. You can see Eric in films such as The Green Room and Jurassic World, and in an upcoming series called The Lowdown, starring Ethan Hawke. You can also hear my full talk with Eric on my Patreon site. Stay tuned for episode 17, where we turn to the Iron Horse himself. Year after year, he's crushing home runs, racking up hits, breaking single-season records, securing a place in Cooperstown just a few seasons into his career. And yet, somehow, it's not enough. For reasons no one fully understood, not then, not even now, he felt he had to do more. He had to do something obsessive, something unreasonable, something insane, and something unforgettable. Next time, the story of Lou Gehrig, and why, for him and no one else, taking even one day off was unthinkable. The show is produced and edited by me, Ben Orlando. Music by Sergi Papkin and Ashot Danielian at Pixabay. Good night.